to grow in a certain way that was thought to grow, like you see here in the second floor plan of that would be then the first floor. Actually, this is a little bit displaced because this section here fits to the second floor of this plan. But that doesn't really matter, because what really happened is that Alicia, who you saw in the first picture, expanded her house on the ground floor. So that is what really happened. So this house, first scheme, was expanded in that way, first horizontally to an extreme, whatever she could grab, whatever land she could, let's say, occupy, and later on it grew vertically, with the result, which is just a curious detail, but this street lantern, which was standing before in public space, is now sticking in her house, and in many other houses, what you see here in the back, it's just sticking out of the buildings. So the whole idea of a block structure separated by sidewalks and roads is completely abandoned. You will see in a couple of other study cases similar examples.
So basically we're talking about new spatial representations. Despite being dense, even teeming with buildings and inhabitants, the barrios are often represented as simple, as we said, simple blank spaces, but the implication is clear. They're not really part of the city. They're considered temporary. So what does it mean to conceive of more than half of the city as temporary or marginal? Moreover, standard maps of Krakow show the city as a horizontal plane, completely flat. Yet the city is actually a staggering combination of mountains, hills, valleys that interlace infrastructure. These topographical details tells a socio-economic story and patterns of wealth and poverty. And here we have, up on the screen, an interesting story about the combination of these two densities. This is the largest housing project done in the 50s, just finished in 1958 by Carlos Raúl Villanueva.
Actually, we should have a picture. Let me see where this didn't show up.
That's okay. Well, that's okay. Leave it there.
Here it is.
Okay. Okay. So over here, this is the way it was planned. Okay? And this, it should go next, huh?
Yeah.
There we go. And this is what happened 50 years later. Most of the green spaces were taken over. However, they plugged into in this concept as they plug in, clip in. They took electricity, they shared the common facilities. They respected, however, the sports fields. And this is one of the ideas of our practice. If we were to identify some areas in which we're working, which is with sports, with water, with certain infrastructures, that we have certain categories that we've developed. Now these are the super blocks. So here we're starting to see how to represent these areas.
So this is really a quite interesting story. We had a chance yesterday to talk with you guys about 23 de Enero, because that project was actually built to evict people who lived at that time in, let's say, in conditions which are similar to the barriers you see. That was in 1958. We don't want to go really in detail in that project because we're trying to progress in our lectures and concentrate on some other points. It is, however, interesting to point out that this had been the largest social housing project in Latin America. You have nowadays in this precinct, which covers 3 subway stations and an area with about 150,000 people living inside it. It is almost a city within a city. It's like in a tremendous cohesion also socially what's going on there. We made in the Urban Think Tank a short movie about it that we will be happy to point you out where you can download it as well from the internet, from our page. That is from a presentation, also to show a little bit how our practice works. This was shown in Kassel, in the Fridericianum, where we presented in Germany those processes of adaptation, providing the visitors with bricks to get them inspired and take some blocks home and maybe start to invade their own Eastern German Plattenbauten, Siedlungen, etc.
When we think about these informal settlements, there's certain conceptual dualities that are commonly deployed, but that are out of date. Traditional versus modern. This doesn't exist anymore. It's true that in the past informality was the traditional sector, the craftsman, etc. And formality was the modern. But this is a distinction that today is lacking. We find informal activities on the internet at every level of modern economy. The same is true for local versus global. Street vendors, for example, who are in the epitome of the local, now frequently have arrayed behind them an entire complex supply chain, from Korean to Chinese production centers, to organizing and distributing warehouses in the abandoned historic districts of the city, to the guys selling the pirated DVDs on the street. You would never buy a record today, you know, in a shop. You would obviously buy it on the street.
It was quite interesting. Salgado, the Nobel Prize winner from Portugal, was in Caracas presenting his new book, and it was actually an event organized by the Lord Mayor of Caracas. So it had a clearly political motive as well, this presentation. At the end of the presentation, the book was sold inside the Teresa Carreño, which is the big, let's say, opera house, National Theater, for about 3 times the price at which it was sold, like just out of the parking lot on the street. So the exact identical book. And that should not be just a nice anecdote, that should really show you the lines, how this commerce is working in a much bigger system. This is not like somebody selling self-baked breads on the corner. You know, you have to be plugged in a distribution system which is much more complex, which is not that easy to access for an individual, but it shows you how those individuals are actually networked inside a bigger economy that is obviously global.
So these are some maps or some representations, precisely slices of the city taken, as you can see up here, in 3 places of the valley, where you find different types of settlements. These are embedded settlements within the fabric of the city that usually happened. And this was a real estate deal between these 2 sides when the highway was built, and part of the land was expropriated from the owner of one contiguous farm. And in exchange for giving up part of the land, he was given higher building rights.
Interestingly enough, the World Bank Sites and Services Program is investing at the moment in Caracas, in these city zones. The city mayor of that particular part of the city, Caracas, consists of, we show this later in a scheme, of 5 different municipalities with 5 mayors, 5 police forces in 5 different uniforms, etc., etc. On top of that, you have a Lord Mayor with another police force, so it's a little bit complicated. But in that particular case, the city mayor concentrated the funds available to the city in the north of this area on the basis of the ownership, and that's, again, this is one of the key factors understanding this whole development in the city, on the basis that this northern area, because of this real estate deal that Alfredo just mentioned, fell in the hands of the city.
But for instance, this southern area was not part of that original real estate deal, so it was not owned by the municipality, so therefore it could not receive the funds.
So it should point out that the funds that the city mayor in this particular case received are not invested on the basis of an evaluation of needs, of maybe possible landslides, lacking infrastructure, etc. There's no doubt that the money that they have in their hands is invested in the area, which is, although they will not aspire to take on the property and evict the people, but it is invested in territory which is legally theirs. So it is important. At the end of the day, when it comes to the point when there's funds available, people invested on the basis of exactly those reasons. Now we show you a series of maps that we produced of an area which is just this particular zone, which has one of the highest densities in Caracas, which is this 768 persons per hectare. And it should show you also the dramatic situation of this topography. Here you see a line per meter. In the next picture, this is actually showing you the key on the right is like a little bit too diffuse, but I can tell it anyways. That's simply showing you the level above, the meters above sea level. That should just mean the darker area are lower